Hi, I want to welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Stephen Procopio. I'm the president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana. We are a state research policy group organization as well as watchdog. Um, I want to thank our sponsor, the Louisiana Independent Pharmacy Association. You represent your local community pharmacies for making this webinar possible. I think we have a really great topic today. Y'all may be aware that earlier this year, lawmakers unanimously passed one-door legislation which will transfer social service, public assistance, and workforce development programs from the Department of Children and Family Services to the Workforce Commission and the Health Department. And this transition is supposed to be completed by October 2027. So that's a whole lot of changes happening in a relatively short period of time. That's going to be fairly quick. I think we have the two best people in the state to talk about this. We have Secretary Susan Showen uh, in the department, Secretary of Department of the Louisiana Workforce Commission, but soon to be named Louisiana Works. We can talk about that as well. And also Representative Stephanie Baralt, who sponsored the legislation that renames the department and transfers additional workforce development. Thank y'all so much for participating.
Thank you for having us.
I'm
Glad
going
to
to
be
start
here.
with a few broad questions, but just a little word about format before we get there. I'm going to start with a broad question. Have y'all answer that so this is sort of set generally what's going on. Then I'm going to turn it over to Melinda, who will ask a few more questions. But a lot of this is going to be driven by the participants who are online. They're going to be putting questions in the chat and in the Q&A section. Then Melinda will summarize that. And a reminder, because this always happens, get your questions in early, because usually people are just sort of listening. And then, oh, wait, we often don't get to all the questions we get. So make sure you get your questions in early. All right, with that, all right, this one-door legislation, I think we want to know more about it. What does it mean? I think there's a similar policy. This was sort of developed on in Utah. Can y'all both explain what the philosophy is, what you'd like to see, what the goal is? Representative Brawl, when we start with you, since it was your legislation.
Sure. So there's kind of two sides to this. The goal is to centralize delivery of safety net services to provide better service to our residents, both coming into services, but also as importantly, going back out on the other side. So the way this kind of is working from the state's perspective, we are shuffling the services around and consolidating the way we're delivering. So instead of having 3 or 4 different offices for someone to go to who's looking for services, we're kind of consolidating that so that there'll be fewer places to go, eventually one place, one door, both digitally and in person. So someone who's needing services will be able to get to that place more easily. A lot of times the people who are needing services are also having challenges with resources. It's really hard to go all over town, waiting in line, talking to different people, none of them talking to each other. And we're trying to consolidate and streamline all of that so that people who need help, we're better able to help them when they need it and where they need it. Get you signed up for the services that you need more quickly. But as importantly, the person that you're going to be coming in contact with, and I know Secretary Showen will really talk a lot more about this, is going to be a case manager who is trained across all the systems. And so they can help you get what you need and then ask the very important next question, which is, okay, now how do we get you to a point where you don't need these services anymore? Is it a new job? Is it training for upskilling for a better job? Is it childcare? Is it transportation? What are your barriers to get you to the next level so that you no longer need state services, that you're living a full and independent life? And so that was the goal. I think it's going to be a process for sure, and she will talk a little about that. But the goal at the end of this is serving the citizens of Louisiana more efficiently to get them what they need, and then get them up so they don't need us anymore.
Okay, Secretary, it sounded like all the hard work was done by Representative Brault. She passed the bill. Now you have to do the relatively easy work of making it happen. So why don't you walk us through sort of what you see the goal as and you know how you're going to approach this and what will be the benefit for the state when we're done?
So very funny, Stephen. I will start, if it's all right, just by giving a brief outline of the specific changes that we're making.
Yeah,
and when
sounds
people,
fantastic.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, can expect those to happen. So what's happening in a large sense starts this October, so October 2025. What's happening in October 2025 is the SNAP program, which is supplemental nutrition, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is food stamps. That is moving from the Department of Children and Family Services to the Louisiana Department of Health. And this makes sense for a whole lot of reasons, but largely because the Medicaid and the SNAP programs are delivered in really similar ways. So this is going to provide an opportunity for people who are doing very similar things to work together, to the point where actually right now they're using two instances of the same technology system. So there's going to be a lot of efficiencies that just come from that. The workforce programs that are currently under the oversight of the Department of Children and Family Services, and the best known one of those is the SNAP Employment and Training Program, that's going to come to us. So we are now sort of de-siloing a lot of the workforce programs that are out there, and we're consolidating them with our existing workforce functions. So those are going to work more smoothly. With that, to kind of recognize the larger role that we're playing, that Representative Baralt really just described very well, we are renaming ourselves to Louisiana Works. So there's a whole rebranding strategy that's about to roll out. And then I really want to emphasize this part because it's so incredibly important that this change will allow DCFS to be a standalone child welfare and protection agency. And we know how important that is in Louisiana, and having a dedicated agency at the cabinet level that is exclusively focused on the protection of our most vulnerable, most innocent people is a really core part of the message that's happening here as well. So the idea is that each of these three agencies is going to be able to better focus on its core responsibilities and what they're really good at. So the Department of Health is going to be a hub for eligibility determination and benefits administration. DCFS will be the child protection and welfare agency working towards a world-class enterprise to protect our people. And the new Louisiana Works will focus on the core goal of bringing our people to self-sufficiency. So this is about building the American dream in Louisiana. The core of social mobility, of self-sufficiency, of success in American society is high quality employment. So we are going to focus our efforts on that. When people walk in the one door that we're always talking about, they will see an employment counselor who will help map out a path to self-sufficiency, and the social benefits will provide an opportunity to help them overcome barriers that they encounter on that pathway. I do want to kind of finally wrap up, and Representative Baralt is wonderfully articulate on this issue. Self-sufficiency through employment is not the goal for every single person that comes in the door. We will have people who are going to need benefits for the long term, and we want to make sure that we preserve those benefits for the people that are most going to need them and allow it to be a temporary transition out of poverty for the majority of the people coming in.
All right, fantastic. It was a great overview. And we've already got questions, which is amazing. I don't think it was me. I think it was y'all having a very interesting topic. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melinda to start diving in a little bit more deep, and then we'll get to the questions. Now we're up to 3, so fantastic. Melinda?
Okay, thank y'all. Keep the questions coming, folks who are watching. Secretary Shawan, I kind of want to make sure there's another piece of it, which is the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, which is TANF. Are those programs in TANF also coming to you? Because I mean, that's some direct cash assistance programs to families in poverty, but there are other programs in there like combating substance abuse, ways to address homelessness, domestic violence issues, among an array of others. So are all of those going to you as well, or how are those getting divvied up, and what's the timeline for that?
And thank you, Melinda, because I got so wrapped up in our immediate changes that I didn't actually finish the story there. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that. The TANF funding is going to start flowing to Louisiana Works in 2027. And Stephen alluded to this earlier, that that's the ultimate timeline here. But many of these programs, the ones that you're talking about, are going to continue to be administered by the Department of Children and Family Services. And TANF, for those who don't know, is actually a fairly complicated program, and there are 4 core goals of TANF, and some of those sit far more clearly in the wheelhouse of the new DCFS than they do with us. And so we will continue to make sure that that funding flows to those programs through DCFS. So we will make sure that the types of programs that contribute to child welfare and child protection continue to be funded very well, and that we ensure that those remain successful. There are some workforce programs that are currently funded through TANF, and we want to make sure that those programs are integrated and blended with the larger workforce development system. And we want to make sure that those cash assistance programs are well conceived enough to make sure that they're actually helping people overcome those barriers that we talked about earlier. So we don't want to just be kind of giving people cash assistance with no sort of reference back to the actual struggles that that individual and that family are experiencing as they try to build their way to the American dream. We want to make sure that it's built in such a way that it really does lift them up.
Okay. Representative Peralt, this was a pretty significant government restructuring to tackle as a legislator, and it passed unanimously at the end of all of this process, which in this legislature can be remarkable, quite frankly. So can you talk us through a little bit what type of feedback you got from your colleagues, what kind of concerns you had to address, and kind of how you managed to navigate through this legislation through the whole process?
I think one of the good things about the idea of it all is just that there really is something in it that everyone can be proud of and excited about. A lot of times in the legislature, obviously, we get on our teams and we kind of back against the wall with mistrust, maybe, or doubting motives of the other team. But it was a very intentional effort, and not just by those in the legislature. I had other people helping us as well, but also Secretary Showen was a big part of this too, in reaching out to the people who maybe are sometimes influencing policy behind the scenes to fully explain the concerns that we mostly got were that people were going to lose access to the benefits. Whether it was we're shutting down an office in a specific place, or you're just going to cut off access to whatever the benefit is, which obviously was never the intention of the case. They were concerned that we were adding a lot of new requirements on, which, requirements may or may not be coming, but had nothing to do with this legislation. That's all separate from this. This was just all about how do we streamline and provide services better. And so it kind of started out with a little bit of mistrust. I think probably the first couple of committee hearings, we got the most questions, the most pointed, the most doubting questions, but we just made a very intentional decision to speak to every one of the people who had questions and to walk through the whole process. I think everyone truly, at the end of the day, want the same thing. We all want the residents of Louisiana to be able to be self-sufficient. It's just how do we get there? And providing better service, being more efficient. One of the questions that I did get a lot when I would present to groups was, well, how are you going to pay for this? Because I think these conversations have come up in the past. How do you do this better? How do you clear up some of the, when people call in and no one answers the phone, or it's cumbersome, or it takes forever to get someone to get back with you? How do you make it more efficient without costing a lot of money? And when we were able to say, no, we've also found efficiencies in streamlining, in not having 2 different offices of people providing the same services on the same system down the street from each other, but combining those. And with those efficiencies, we're able to take the resources we have and cross-train and just better provide the services. Once they got the whole vision, then everyone was on board with just wanting to be able to help the citizens, not with a handout, as much as the hand up and getting to a point where they don't need it anymore. So everyone was on board once we explained it.
Okay, well, to that point, are there any anticipated state office closures where people have traditionally accessed services. Particularly, there's always a sensitivity to people in rural areas because they have less access to transportation. A lot of times the community is in need. So are you expecting, and this is probably Secretary Shawan's question, but are you expecting any office closures as part of the reconfiguration, any layoffs of employees that are doing this work now?
It's an excellent question. And I think to Stephanie's point, we really can't blame people for a level of concern around these sorts of issues. Our intention here is very much to maintain and potentially even improve access to services for our people. And the plight of our rural populations is really top of mind for a lot of us in this space. There will be office closures, but I do want to give an example of what we're talking about there. For example, in one particular location relatively close to Baton Rouge, we have a situation where we've got a DCFS office, Children and Family Services, and directly across the parking lot, we have a workforce office. There is absolutely no reason to have two separate leases and have people have to walk across a parking lot in order to access services. We also have a lot of offices around the state where we've got, two people representing two different programs. A lot of our staffing and a lot of our training has historically been centered on federal funding streams, on programs. So you've got one person delivering one program and another person delivering another program. And then across town, you've got two more programs and two more people. If we can cross-train all four of those people on all the programs, then people are going to have more access to services, and we may potentially be able to have more locations where people can access a broader set of services. With the co-location model, I also want to give another quick example that we were looking to close a couple of rural offices that we had in the southwest part of the state because we just didn't have the traffic to justify keeping those locations open. But we did have a lot of concern from the local legislators because these parishes, being very rural, really didn't have a lot of access to anything at all. We were able to move those locations in with community college campuses that were in those same parishes. So we now have a much lower cost ability to continue to provide services to our people and keep that rural access available for them. And that's kind of part of this one door model is co-location and cross-training. And that's where I think a lot of the improvement in services can be expected to happen.
Okay. Secretary Shawan, we're getting a question about whether or not any RFPs are open for software development or implementation of some of this. I don't know if it's somebody who's interested, but how much is technology going to be a piece of this? And are there any RFPs currently for technology involving this transition?
So technology is going to be a major part of this story. The Office of Technology Services, which I think anybody asking about RFPs is probably familiar with, is really taking the lead on making sure that this is a whole of government, a whole of Louisiana solution. So I would recommend folks looking at an opportunity to get involved on the technology side to reach out directly to OTS rather than trying to go agency by agency. And I do kind of want to springboard off of that because I think this is such an important part of the current administration's approach that we have made a lot of reorganizations between the three agencies that we're talking about today. But there have been a number of other reorganizations of the state government to make things work more efficiently and more effectively. But ultimately, this is about collaboration and the breaking down of silos between all of our agencies. And so more centralized systems, more shared resources across the board are going to be a big part of this picture. And so that goes for technology, but it also goes for potentially, shared call centers, shared digital front doors, things like that people are looking for. So again, I would encourage everybody listening in this space, rather than having conversations agency by agency, go ahead and talk with OTS about about their vision for the solution.
Okay, good tip. Representative Brault, I believe I remember in your testimony that you said you traveled to Utah to see kind of what because they're the sort of original state of the one door concept. So what did you learn there, and what was their experience that you took away for Louisiana?
Sure, sure. Well, and I'll back up even just a little bit more than that with how I got involved with this process to begin with was during appropriations hearings, and Secretary Showen was in and kind of mentioned co-locating, to which I very quick hit my button, co-locating with DCFS. And that's fantastic. I love the efficiency of it. Are you talking about doing any more collaboration? And her smile was big and she said, oh, yes, we are. To which after that, I said, I'm all in. I support this. I want to help, and invited myself on the Utah trip. And the beautiful thing about being able to go up there is that they've been doing this since the 90s. So they have done all of the trial and error. Let's figure all this out. One thing that they have going for them that I'm hoping we soon will is permission and flexibility with their federal funding and how they're able
I was
to
just about to
use
ask
that
about that.
across. Sure. So that is something that they started doing. And then I don't know that I fully ever got the answer of why the federal government said, wait, don't do that. And they grandfathered them in and kind of put a stop to other states following in their footsteps for a while. But we are very fortunate that we are moving back towards a position where they're going to do some pilot programs. And I think we're in line to be one of them that will allow states to be more flexible with the federal funding. So all the things that Secretary Showen is talking about instead of having two people sitting next to each other who are doing in essence the same work, we can cross-train them so that they are both fully aware of all the other programs and they're not siloed. I think that's going to be a really important part of this. They were able to kind of talk us through how to get the legislation passed was a very small part of it, but it was working through how to merge culturally the agencies, but they also talked a lot about the benefits. So when COVID hit, whereas so many in the country were scrambling around, they were able to shift resources because all the silos were down, because they collaborate, because they work together. They were able to shift resources over to where they were most needed to handle the crisis that kind of hit us all unexpectedly. And so that's one of the other benefits. And one of the things that's really important, and this is a little bit off topic, but going to the workforce side of this, once everyone is collaborating and breaking down some of the silos, a lot of times right now, the way we have this set up, it's regional. Whereas when we've got a meta coming in, we need all the regions working together to how do we get more resources to a project like a meta coming in. And that's one of the reasons that Secretary Showen is so perfect to be heading all this up, because of the collaboration that she does. And it's not just her either, it's the other agencies as well, who look and say, where's the need and how do we shift resources to get the needs? That's the same with the staffing, that's the same with the technology, that's the same with as people are coming in, what are your needs? It's looking at needs and then shifting resources on the back end on how do we solve those problems. So I don't remember where the question even started, but
Started about
Answer
Utah.
regardless.
that's right, Utah. That's it. That's one of the great things we learned about Utah is that, everybody's got to be working together. And then we went to, they call it a one-stop. And we got to see everybody walking in and they're in a queue line and someone will kind of take their name and what are you here for? And then we saw the case managers, and the vast majority of the space in that building were computers and job trainers and educators. And so they were all kind of spread out, and it was just very seamless and smooth, but you could very clearly see where all the resources were. So people who were coming in had, the resources from their case manager, but also if they needed to go fill out a job application or go do some sort of training, it was all right there in one spot. And it was pretty inspiring.
Okay. Secretary Showen, we have a question from someone who said they like the one-stop approach, but they've worked with Alice community members before. And I guess for people who are watching who may not know that term, it's essentially households who work, but they still have a struggle to pay their bills and make ends meet. And this person is saying that previous challenges have been the lack of appropriate transition of benefits once someone is employed. And they're asking, have we engaged individuals who receive these benefits and agencies who support these community members to know what policy barriers are regarding the time frames allowed to keep the benefits that are available to them? Does that make sense?
It does. It's an excellent question. And one of the things that I believe this participant is asking about is something called the benefits cliff. And a number of people are probably familiar with this who are listening in. And a great example is Medicaid, because it's kind of all or nothing. If somebody is receiving Medicaid benefits, they take a job, they start to work, they start to stabilize themselves. But if they receive a promotion or an increase in pay that takes them $1 over the Medicaid eligibility threshold, they lose their health insurance and they are worse off than they were before they received that promotion or that pay increase. There are some aspects of the benefits cliff that require a federal solution. I am gratified to say that there are a number of people now talking about that at the federal level, but I will be really gratified if they actually do something. And so we will keep our eyes out for that. There are some opportunities that we are working on within the state to partner with our employers to help the people that are working for them better transition across these benefits gaps in the system. An example of that might be to offer people who are receiving Medicaid employer-based health care earlier in the employment cycle than they might otherwise become eligible for it, which might ease that transition. There are some other possible ways that we might deal with that as well. One of the phrases that came up in really early conversations that I had with people, many of whom are with the Pelican Institute here in Louisiana, but other people as well, about the challenge of the one-door model is that the federal social services programs in this country have served to make poverty survivable, but not escapable. And I think that's really kind of the core of the issue here. It's a complicated process. I don't want to claim that I have all the answers to it. There are things that we can do at the state level to make things easier. There are things that we can do at the employer and workforce system level that might make things easier. Things like, again, like employer-based childcare, transportation solutions, and so forth. But it's not going to be an easy or seamless solution, and it probably won't be a blanket solution. It's going to require communities to get involved.
We have a couple of questions about the current workers who administer a lot of these programs. Representative Baralt, does the legislation explicitly say that the DCFS employees who work on these programs that are the programs that are getting moved to the Workforce Commission and to LDH, are they required to go with them? Does it account for that? Is the anticipation that the current DCFS employees will move with their programs?
Secretary Sean can probably add a lot more. What we wrote into the legislation is that there will be no mass layoffs. I think they'll transition over, but I don't know that the jobs will be exactly the same. She can probably answer that a little bit better than I can in terms of how exactly they will be transitioned over.
Okay, so Secretary Shawan, I'd like you to answer that and also talk about the timeline of when these workers might be moved.
Sure. So the largest transition of workers is happening this October, and that will be the transition of the SNAP program from DCFS to the Department of Health. That's going to move the most workers. We do have a few moving to us in this October, and then a few will move with TANF. TANF actually has a very small number of workers dedicated to it, and those folks will move in 2027. The vision for October of this year is on the last day of September, people will have a certain job, they will have a certain laptop, they will have a certain chair that they sit in, and on October 1st, all of those things will remain exactly the same. There will be transitions over time, but the vision is that on October 1st, that will be a really seamless transition. The one sort of detail there is their mobile phones will not move over, but otherwise the equipment and everything else will remain the same. So, over time, though, we are expecting the job descriptions to change somewhat as we engage in cross-training. So I don't want to speak precisely to how the Department of Health is going to move forward with integrating the SNAP and Medicaid eligibility determination and administration tasks. But it will be something that, again, is deliberate, that is worked through with the cooperation and full participation of the state civil service, with the input of employees that are affected, with the workforce people moving to us this October. Same sort of vision, but we are already having very detailed conversations with them about how they can integrate with our current systems. And I do kind of just want to speak to this really quickly, that we're doing pilots on the ground right now in terms of co-location of staff directly serving our people. And we have these conversations going on with the workforce people coming over to us. And it's amazing to me to watch the level of enthusiasm and the level of kind of almost like joyful cooperation that people are having when they realize that they've all got the same mission, right? Like the people that work in these spaces are mission-driven people. Nobody is working in this space to get rich or be lazy. These are hard jobs, and there's an emotional component to them that's incredibly important. And when we see these people come together and realize that they have the opportunity to serve the people that they care about in a better way, and watch them work together to better understand how to do that, it really has been genuinely an inspiring experience. And having these workforce folks come in and join our family is really exciting. They are our people. They are doing the same kind of work, and we're really glad to have them with us.
I think we might have some employees from these agencies watching, because the next question,
Probably so. I
the
can't wait to have your workforce people with me. I'm just saying that.
the next question that somebody asked is about, for current employees of these agencies that will be cross-trained, will this allow them to have more opportunities for growth in their field and more income earning potential? So I think that's Secretary Showen's question.
It certainly is. And yes, we certainly see things moving in that direction. We have had some preliminary conversations about the evolution of the case management role, but I think there's a recognition that there's a level of complexity and problem-solving ability incorporated in that role that would very likely justify a higher pay point. We're not all the way in what that might look like, but I believe, we need to invest in our workers that are directly providing assistance to the public. I think it's important that we approach things from that standpoint. And I do think it's incredibly likely that even in the short term, greater opportunities for growth will be opened up. Just to sort of talk through that, right now, somebody who's an expert in a particular program has a career progression that kind of naturally leads them up through the leadership ranks of that particular program, but we don't always have a lot of turnover in those jobs. If somebody is cross-trained on a multitude of different programs, there's a lot more places for them to go as they look to climb the ladder. And I think that's, explicitly one of the benefits of this model that we're looking at.
Okay, I'm going to broaden it out a little bit, because we have some questions that are sort of more workforce development writ large type of questions. But I want to start with one that I think both of you can talk through, and that's about Louisiana's historical difficulty retaining many of its college graduates and finding them the appropriate job fit, and not seeing them go to Houston, Atlanta, Dallas, all the places, y'all have seen kids go. But we have a bunch of unfilled jobs here. We have thousands of them. So what is the missing piece for Louisiana? What do we need to do better to connect graduates with jobs? And I'm going to start with Representative Baralt from the legislative side. I know that's something y'all talk about a lot. Where do you see the legislature fitting in to help address this problem?
We do, and I will tell you this is personal. My youngest is dating someone from out of state, so this is personal. We want to find him a job here so that he won't leave. Yes, the answer is we do. We talk about this a lot. I think in terms of the model that we're talking about, the answer is, and the reason that during the entire legislative process, I was very emphatic that the one door needed to be managed by Louisiana Works. That is the agency that is most closely tied to our business community. They are the ones who know what jobs we need filled. And so they are going to be the ones who are best able to, that person who's walking in the door, they're not going to just necessarily get you a job down the street. They're going to say, hey, and also there is a better job across the street, down the street. Let's get you trained for a better job that's good for that person, but that's also going to help us fill the jobs because the administration is out there every day, an hour ago, announcing new economic development coming to Louisiana, over $60 billion at last check of new investment that's coming to Louisiana, and we need to get people trained specifically for those jobs. So that is one of the reasons that I am very happy that we ended up with a piece of legislation that is going to be coordinating so closely with Louisiana Works, with our business community, and also with our educators. And a lot of work has already been done on this that I'm really proud of, and even work that came before me that I get no credit for, which is to really build up the technical colleges, to really build up all the different, we have our LSU, we have our four-year schools, but we also have the other schools that are gearing people more towards, you don't necessarily need an English degree, you might need something that's more technical to fill those good jobs. The one piece that I'm hoping we kind of talk about going forward a little bit is I've gotten some feedback from some local people that said, we've got the technical colleges, but those are still schools that you still have to take all the Englishes and all the other classes. Maybe also focus on just a certificate in a specific, maybe it's welding, maybe it's electrical, whatever it is, but some specific programs that are going to target people towards that. So at the high end, I think we've got a lot of really good, exciting economic development coming to town that I'm hoping is going to provide the jobs for some of our college graduates and even above. But then as we kind of go into the different levels of technical skills and knowledge, tying them in with the community, tying them in with the educators, and also making sure that we have education at every single level. So if someone I cannot take another English class, but you know what, I really love welding. Let's get you trained. Let's get you to do it without having to necessarily require all the different classes. It was something I kind of hope we talk about in the future.
Secretary Showen, I feel like you're very well equipped for this. You have a background at LED, but also LCTCS, the Community and Technical College System. But before you answer this question, I just want to point out we have somebody who is watching who asked this question, who is the Employee Relations Director at ULM in Monroe, and she would like to know what workforce development programs are specifically in the works for college students and graduates. So she is definitely concerned about keeping people here.
I love this topic. Melinda, you were absolutely right that this is, in many ways kind of what I consider my life's work. The two primary gaps that I think we're really up against when it comes to keeping our young people here are, first of all, awareness. And I think Representative Brault addressed both of these things in her comments. Awareness on the part of young people of where the best opportunities are, and also awareness for college graduates who have particular skills about what opportunities there are for those people specifically. And then the second big gap is alignment of our educational system to the needs of the economy. So both of these things are things that we are looking at opportunities to address. We will need the help of Stephanie Brault and many others in the legislature to help to address these things. But just a couple of words on things that are currently happening right now in both of these spaces. On the awareness side, there's a lot of work that we are doing with the K-12 system. I firmly believe that we have to get down to the absolute youngest ages to get people to start to actually dream about what it's like to be an adult with a productive and relevant job that gives them a sense of purpose and fuels a sense of self-satisfaction that I feel like we don't really get without that kind of work. We as adults, I think, do our young people a disservice about complaining about work all the time, by saying, like, just wait until you have a mortgage to pay or you have bills to pay, etc. We make adulthood and work sound like a terrible burden. And I think we need to start talking to our children, our young people in our lives, about what a good thing good work is and how they can start to think about that and envision that for themselves. As we get into the older grades, but still in the K-12 system, we need much more expansive opportunities for industry engagement, and we need to make that easy for the industry partners. So there's conversations around that, but I don't think we're all the way into a solution there yet. But we know that the industry partners are willing to come to the table in that space, make sure that high school students are aware of the employers in their area. The new K-12 accountability system, with its emphasis on internships, I think is going to be enormously helpful there. Get young people to understand what it is to have a job, to go to work, understand what workplace culture is like, but also become familiar with employers in their region, in their area. And then the education alignment piece, Rick Edmonds in the recent session established the task force for career alignment that is co-chaired by me and by Kim Hunter-Reid. We recently had our first meeting, our Commissioner of Higher Education, Kim Hunter-Reid, for those who aren't familiar with her. That venue is going to be a fantastic place to help to build clear connections between particular academic programs and particular jobs. And I would be happy to discuss, these sorts of concepts in a more granular way with our friend from ULM and anybody else that might want to reach out, because fully engaging our four-year colleges and universities in the workforce pipeline and in the pipeline to high-quality jobs in Louisiana needs to be part of the story. It's not just the community colleges and the technical programs. It is also the four-year colleges and universities.
Let me add real quick, when I saw this task force that was put together, and we were not initially named as a member, I went and jockeyed for it, because I also think this is really something that needs to be worked on. And so I'm fantastic that we were able to get on this, and I'm very optimistic and enthusiastic about the work that we're doing. And then the two co-chairs are the exact right people that need to be on there. So I just want to throw that in there. Paul is definitely supportive of this initiative.
And we are so glad to have you be part of that, Stephen.
Well, let me ask, sort of writ large, Secretary Showen, what are the largest workforce needs that you see statewide? Essentially, what are the biggest gaps where we have a lot of employment opportunities, but we don't have enough workers to fill them?
The most obvious gigantic gap that kind of keeps me up at night is the skilled trades. We have far too few young people aspiring to join the ranks of the skilled trades. And these are excellent jobs. In Louisiana, these jobs can absolutely provide people a super solid middle-class lifestyle with very little debt if they go through a program at the community and technical colleges, if they go through programs by other training providers like ABC, the Associated Builders and Contractors, and a number of others. They can get into these pathways straightforwardly. We have an absolutely world-class, the world-class industrial construction industry based here. Our industrial construction workforce is legendary globally, but we do not have enough of our young people aware of that, enough of our young people aspiring to join these ranks. And I also want to point out these mega projects. We talk a lot about the Meta project, the AI data center, as if these are going to be data scientist jobs that they're primarily hiring for. By far the bulk of the permanent workers that they're going to need are people more in the skilled and technical roles that they're going to need there. So we need electricians, we need electricians galore, we need people interested in welding, in pipe fitting, and everybody knows that they need a plumber and they're hard to find and they're expensive. These are all really great job opportunities for our young people. We have some serious deficits in the healthcare workforce. We obviously need lots of people going into manufacturing and process technology jobs that may not be the skilled trades, but may be more advanced engineering type roles there. But I think I would really put my flag in the ground right now for the skilled trades in terms of people looking for opportunity.
Let me add, and this has been sort of my yeah, what I've noticed is that yes, in and of itself, these skilled trades are also just great jobs and you can do very well for you and your family, but a lot of them also seem to be leaping off points for small businesses. A lot of people
Yes.
going to work, and then those small businesses, a lot of them, particularly in the construction area, turn out to be really large businesses, servicing other companies. So it's also, if someone wants to go into that area, you can be quite the entrepreneur and going through this path as well.
That's an excellent point, Stephen. And yes, many of our most successful prominent citizens in Louisiana have come up through the skilled trades.
Representative Brault, what do you hear from the employers in your area? What are they looking for? Where are their gaps? Obviously, it's not English based on what you've said, but what kind of workers and degrees and backgrounds are they needing most in your area?
There's not, just specifically in my district, there's not a lot of industry. It's a lot of healthcare workers. Really, it's nurses, it's physicians, it's all of the different levels of healthcare workers that we really are having a shortage of in the area right now. In addition to the fact that we can't find a plumber or an electrician. So I agree with that 100%.
I thought your area was a particularly healthcare heavy area, and it seemed like those shortages would hit your region
Yeah.
pretty hard.
They do.
Let me go back. We have a few more questions about the one door policy that I want to try and get in. We have somebody asking, this is probably for Secretary Showen, how the current changes will be integrated into the existing workforce development boards and career centers to ensure alignment with ongoing programs and services.
That I'm so glad that somebody gave me an opportunity to give a shout out to our local areas. Not everybody, I think, necessarily understands the way the workforce system is structured in Louisiana and in the United States as a whole. It's very complicated. But long story short, we have 15 local areas in Louisiana, each of which oversees the workforce initiatives, and they're the recipients of the federal funding that passes through our agency to support these workforce programs in particular areas. And each one has a board, a workforce development board that helps to direct these activities. Our local areas are the delivery mechanism for workforce development through our agency around the state, and they are an incredibly valuable part of our network and our family. They will need to be the absolute core of making the one door policy work from a practical standpoint. They are the operators of the existing one-stop shops, which are a federally mandated entity. They go by the name of the American Job Centers, and these are going to be central to the creation of these co-located offices that provide the workforce services and the social services that we talked about before. That doesn't mean that the new integrated co-locations and the current American Job Centers are going to be one-to-one, but they are certainly part of the process. And when I mentioned a pilot program that we were doing earlier with the co-locations, those are located at the American Job Centers under the oversight of one of our local areas that's driving the pilot program. But I did not want to end today's session without some love being shown towards our local areas and a word or two about the importance of them for the one-door model.
But while we're on local areas, I could just throw in, you're doing a ton already, and it's fantastic. But what about local community foundations? It seemed to have very similar goals. There's a
Yep.
lot of programs that they have that they're putting their own money into, really supplementing some of these either services or job location. How much have they been involved, or you reached out to as far as this, one-door policy?
That's a good question. So the United Way was represented on the original task force established by Governor Jeff Landry in early 2024 that helped to develop a lot of recommendations that were incorporated in the legislation that Representative brought us. So they did have direct input there, but I also don't want to sound like this has only been limited to the United Way contributions. We oversee the Community Services Block Grant, which provides funding to a number of community action agencies around the state. Certainly, we have a very good two-way communication street going with going between the community action agencies and our state office that helps to provide some input there. But I think, to me, the kind of core answer here is that we are going to need these solutions to be community-based, in the sense that every community has a series of assets and a series of gaps in terms of what they're able to provide people on this pathway to self-sufficiency. And those assets and gaps are particular to each one of those communities. So we're going to need people to work through on a community basis. This is what we're able to provide people in our region, and here are the things that we're going to need to get somebody to contribute to. So those sorts of efforts are very grassroots. They're very granular. They're very on the ground. We will certainly be enabling those things from the state level, but we can't make those decisions from the state level, or we would make the wrong decisions, right? Because we're not there on the ground.
Thanks.
Representative Burrell, we have a question about the legislation and whether or not anything in the bills actually changed the rights that people have to the benefits, the rights to a fair hearing for those who either have been denied or have challenges to their SNAP, FITAP, TANF benefits, any of that. Did your legislation do anything to change any of the processes that were currently in place in that regard?
It's a great question, and the answer is very simply no. Nothing changed in terms of what people are eligible for, or what their rights would be in terms of their benefits that they qualify for. Nothing changed.
So if they need to appeal and want a hearing, any of those processes, it's exactly the same that they've been going through.
Nothing changed at all.
Okay.
That's right.
And then I kind of would like to ask both of you this question about, is there an outreach campaign envisioned to let people know who are impacted, who have been going to one office and might be needing to go to another, just to notify people about the change writ large and sort of where their offices are going to be? Was that considered as part of the legislation, Representative Burrell, or?
I'll let Secretary Shawn talk about specifics, but there was a very intentional decision to have the timeline kind of spaced out for that reason. I mean, in addition to the in the office changes that will be made, to make sure that that is handled appropriately, 100% was part of the thinking when we put the timeline the way that we did, and giving us time to make sure that nobody gets left out or left behind in the process.
Okay, and then Secretary Shawn, from your perspective, kind of what are the outreach efforts that you are planning, and are you working with LDH and DCFS to sort of figure out how that looks?
So we have so many meetings.
It is government.
So many meetings, but that's good. And, the level of collaboration has been really, really solid between the three agencies. The question of how we are consolidating offices is fairly complex. Like, we need to look at, what the existing landscape is. And we've got a really good map now that illustrates what the current status quo is, but selecting which office or whether we need a new office to become kind of the centralized location is really complicated. And we are actually working with the Division of Administration and their facilities management team to help to kind of rationalize that decision so that it's honestly more than just these three agencies looking at this, right? Like we've got state-owned buildings in certain places. We've got ag centers, we've got LCTCS campuses, we've got all sorts of places that may end up being the ultimate best location. So that process of selection needs to be deliberate. We want to move that forward as quickly as possible because we want to achieve the benefits as quickly as possible, but it is a deliberate process. And then, yes, there is a significant media campaign that we are starting the process of planning. Some of that is going to be around the rebrand of our agency so that people understand what that means and what to expect. But in terms of, you know, here's your new centralized location where you go for everything you need, there will need to be community outreach on that. We recognize that, but we are not ready to roll that out yet.
Okay.
All right, great. I want to ask one last sort of broad question to sort of finish up. So, okay, this is supposed to be completed by 2027. I'm going to give you 2 extra years. Say it's 2029. This has been implemented. It's running. You worked out all the glitches and kinks, I'm sure. How do you see, what's your vision on how Louisiana is better? What can we see on the ground if we're not using these benefits? How is this going to help the state as it all? Just sort of tell us the vision. If this works, what's it look like? Representative Barral, why don't you start?
I think the vision behind all of this is twofold. It's workforce participation, but more importantly, it's how do we tackle generational poverty? This has been every elected official, every organization has talked about this, you know, for 100 years. How do we get to the point that the people who feel trapped in poverty, and you know, a lot of times it's the system we created, not just us at the state level, but also at the federal level. We've created a system where people feel trapped. And how do we get it so that people feel like they can get out and they can move forward and be more productive? I've mentioned it before. We've got a lot of economic development coming. The governor's out announcing new things every day. And that can only continue to happen if we've got people in the workforce. So fewer people who feel trapped in a system of dependence, and more people actively working, raising their families, living independent of the need for state services, so that we can all benefit, I think is the vision. And that's what I'm expecting.
All right, Secretary, you get the last word.
Very good, but I don't have too much more to add to what Representative Baralt said. I think that was very well encapsulated. More people working in Louisiana as a percentage of the adult population than we have now. People earning higher wages in Louisiana than they are currently because they have the skills to command those higher wages, and we have more good jobs in the state. A more thriving economic development sector, and you know, widespread recognition that Louisiana is the go-to place for the best workforce on the planet. And finally, safe and healthy children. I want to come back to DCFS being able to really focus on that interest, and the Department of Health being able to better focus on the health of our citizens. So, you know, a healthier, happier, better employed, wealthier Louisiana population.
That's fantastic. And all by 2029. So I'm going to hold you both to it. So fantastic. So
right. We'll come back in a few years and you can tell me.
Thank y'all so much. I thought this was a fantastic conversation. You know, bring me personally, I think we all learned a lot, but also our audience. I want to thank y'all so much. I want to thank all of our participants that all the questions they have. Those were fantastic from a broad range of people, which I also thought was really good. Once again, I want to thank the Louisiana Independent Pharmacy Association for making this possible. I think it was really productive. And then y'all just being, you know, fantastic civil discussion, which is something that, you know, everyone is looking for. And I think it was a great model. Thank y'all so much. Reminder to everyone, this will be on our YouTube channel, and y'all have a good weekend.
Thank you.